What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another video. Today we are flying the Su-30SM, once again doing the famous thrust vectoring demo by the Su-30 with the Su-30 Codename Flanker mod. And although I've just done a video with the Su-30 in a flight demonstration, I thought, you know what, I enjoyed it so much, especially flying with my force feedback stick, that it's just such an incredible experience. I thought I am going to try and better my previous demo, try and get some more airshow display maneuvers in there, a combination of some performed by the Russian Su-30, some by the Malaysian Su-30 MKM, and some which are my own invented maneuvers using thrust vectoring. And this mod is so phenomenal and so fun to fly, and although I do have a fair amount of criticism about it, I just absolutely can't stop flying the Su-30, like I say. So I thought, great opportunity to do yet another video. So sit back and enjoy the ride.
We have 2 good engine starts. You're clear to disconnect the headset. We'll see you on the left with the pit. Thanks a lot.
We're off the brakes, full burner, here we go. Flying from the rear cockpit of the Su-30SM today, just for a change, and also because I think it gives you a really nice view at the front. Stole this demo takeoff straight out of the Malaysian Su-30 MKM demonstration. Low transition, my absolute favorite type of demo takeoff. Hard left turn, let the crowd feel the afterburning power of those AL31FB thrust vectored engines as we transition the 90-degree offset into a vertical climb for our first display maneuver, which is going to be a controlled thrust vectored flat spin. Now, a lot of you have commented in my previous video that I should maybe be using differential thrust. A lot of you have asked me whether or not the real jet uses differential thrust, because the rotation around the spin axis of the real aircraft seems to be a lot higher than mine. And this time I am using differential thrust, although I don't think they do that in real life. Now, if you nail that speed below 200 kph as you start to pull back off the vertical, you do manage to get the nose to rotate quicker. That I figured out. And actually, you've noticed probably that the real aircraft started the rotation slower than I did, but now it's the other way around. The real aircraft spins way faster around its axis than I do, even with differential thrust. As Edita tells us, opasная высота, which in Russian means dangerous height. That is my cue to do the last rotation of pull out parallel to the runway. Transition into the next maneuver, 400 kph, and we go over the top now. The Su-35 on the left is what I use for reference. I tried to do that maneuver about 1,000,000 times, and I got it pretty close once or twice, but it's so difficult to try and figure out and get it exactly right that I've ended up doing a sort of more tame version of that maneuver, which is what you saw in my demonstration. Now, keeping that nose super high up, critically high alpha, only able or possible with thrust vectoring. You can get essentially insane angle of attacks there, and the real jet does that too, as we transition that into a little bit of a stall turn or a wing over. And if you've ever thought that the Hornet has incredible nose authority, well, this airplane is literally from a different planet. Now, the real airplane seems to be like that too. Thrust vectoring does absolute magic, as we all know. And in some cases, I actually think that the real aircraft outperforms this one in terms of the angles that it can generate with some of the thrust vectoring maneuvers. Now, we transition into an inverted 45 that I stole out of the Malaysian MKM demo as well. Incredibly painful for the pilot. Any of you that have done aerobatics in negative G like this is just, it is absolutely vile. I'm not sure the crowd really appreciates the amount of pain the pilots need to go through in that one. Now we transition into a fairly typical Su-30 demonstration maneuver, a very high alpha barrel roll that basically ends up being, again, one of those critically high alpha, stupidly high alpha, almost kind of hovering in the air but not quite type of maneuvers. Now ended up doing a little bit of flare action there as well, just to spice it up a little bit as we push the nose forward, keeping that VSI on 0 there, using 100 meters as the absolute base hard deck. Should never go below that. And now doing my favorite transition the Su-30 does. Now, this is a very clear example of where the real jet has much more pitch authority compared to this one. This one feels extremely lethargic, very slow to react to pitch changes. Obviously, it has incredible nose authority, but that initial pitch change when you absolutely smash the stick back into your gut. It doesn't quite have that. You saw that in the transition. It manages to break critical alpha in the airflow much quicker than I can in this mod, and that's something I hope that they can improve as we do a 4-point roll, something that the Su-30 doesn't generally do in airshow displays, but
Перегрузка предельная.
I do love that Rita telling us that we've reached our maximum G, but we don't care. It is a fly-by-wire jet. Now taking a 90-degree offset and setting ourselves up for the next maneuver, which is going to be the famous tail slide, or the bell, kolokol in Russian. So killing airspeed, keeping an eye on the altimeter there, of course, and just trying to get that perfectly stable. You'll see the real jet manages to slide back down onto its tail considerably further than the one in the game, no matter what you try, how much thrust you use. And once the nose drops in the real jet, it happens far more abruptly than the one in the game. And again, it's just the momentum of the jet, I think. And here, once again, that famous transition where you break all the airflow over the wings immediately by smashing the stick into your gut and then doing a sort of wing over. Now, you can actually get the jet in DCS to rotate around the yaw axis quicker than what you see me doing in the video. However, you end up having kind of a weird thing happen where the jet actually ends up flying sort of backwards, which looks silly, which is why I feathered the rudder pedal just to get that similar to the real jet. Now, had to nail the speed for this one, 350 kph as we start an inverted rotation. You see the real jet has a much quicker yaw rate there, and I didn't really have enough time to do sort of split thrust. And you see my previous demo on the left there with the Su-30. I managed to get it a little bit better, I think. This one wasn't quite as clean or as tidy. Ended up having a little bit of an offset from the crowd line, but it's such a difficult maneuver to nail. You could do it 200 times, and you know, unless you just practice it non-stop, it's just too difficult to nail, especially in such a complex demonstration. I have to say, this is definitely the most complex, and although some of this stuff may look random to you, it is, I guarantee you, not random. Everything about this has been pre-planned, every maneuver, every airspeed, every altitude, and of course it is very difficult to nail everything, especially when something is so complex such as the Su-30 thrust vectoring, because you're not just dealing with simple axis in isolation that you do, for example, now, which is a typical sort of Western maneuver, you know, doing a pass over the airshow center, then a transition, another pass, a transition, another pass, and so forth. When you fly thrust vector jets such as the Su-30, you end up having a much more of a ballet, much more of a dance. Every maneuver ends up being intertwined with another maneuver, and it's far more complicated because you end up dealing with not just speeds and altitudes, but with the momentum. You're playing with the momentum of the aircraft. You need to nail your control inputs just with the way the momentum of the aircraft is acting at that particular moment. Now here we transition into one of those critically high alpha, stupidly high nose up attitudes, and basically just something the Su-30 that does extremely well. And you know, I don't think there's any other jet that can basically fly such low speeds. I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal. So transitioning out of it once again for the next one, we're doing that sort of stall turn. And I do think the mod does an incredible job of making thrust vectoring very believable. And I've said this before, I think it's come an incredibly long way from where it started, this mod. It definitely needs a few key improvements. I think the jet is overpowered. I also think it needs to have much more aggressive pitch authority. So in other words, when you move the stick, there needs to be a much quicker reaction from the aircraft. It's too lethargic, especially if you fly in formation. You'll notice that now as we do a maneuver called a kulbit. In fact, it's a double kulbit. This doesn't really have a name in English because I don't think any Western jet has ever really done this before, so at least I've never seen it, and I'm pretty sure the Russians invented the word because there was no word to describe that maneuver in aerobatics whatsoever. So transition that into another flat spin and then took the 45-degree offset for the next maneuver as we're coming to the end of the display, and this is going to be my favorite,
Перегрузка предельная.
We ignore Rita there once again. This is going to be the slow roll, one of my absolute favorites. Again, something the Su-30 doesn't really do in real life, but I think it certainly could do it, and I do love this airshow maneuver. And like I say, I think the Su-30 mod has come a long way, but some improvements definitely need to be made. I would also really like to see some improvements in terms of just visually in the cockpit, especially in the front cockpit. The rear isn't too bad. The front has a very ugly IRST sensor that looks really stupid, nothing like real life from inside. And also, some of the geometry of the airplane isn't quite right. I know they've improved the tails, as I mentioned in my previous video. They used to be a lot longer and used to look a lot more stupid compared to the real thing. Now they're a little bit better. The base chord of the fins needs to extend beyond the flaperons, which it doesn't in the mod, of course. And the canards could do with a little bit of trimming, and I think the tail boom at the back could also do with a revamp in terms of visual fidelity. But you know what, ballpark, it's pretty good, and I think the way this thing flies, considering it's a mod, the way they've made it feel, it really does feel like a flanker. And it doesn't necessarily feel like the Su-27, but at the same time you can tell that it's an absolute 100% derivative of that jet. Obviously the flight control system is different, you've got the front canards, you've got the thrust vectoring, so although it's based on broadly the same airframe, it is expected to feel a little bit different. And with my force feedback stick, as we come into land now, and with my force feedback stick, it is phenomenal, and I mean absolutely incredible to fly this airplane. Actually, that goes for every jet in DCS, but I keep banging on about it. If you haven't got a force feedback stick now, the only one I can vouch for is the one I use, FFBeast. I'll leave a link in the description below. You can check out my review. It'll probably pop up on the right-hand corner of your screen now. And actually, an interesting peculiar detail as we come into land, you'll notice on the primary flight display on the airplane symbol, there's a few black dots to represent the landing gear and the extended air brake, which is a very clever idea. And some of the instrumentation in general, I find the Russians have really gotten a lot better than some of the Western jets. It's just more intuitive and more clever, a little bit more interesting. Of course, that's not to say in other respects there are things that I do prefer Western aircraft in regards to avionics as well, but that is a really neat feature. And like I said, if you haven't got a force feedback stick, or even if you don't want to get FFBeast, which is the one I use, and I can only praise it, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal, I really recommend that you get yourself something. There's a few new popping up on the market, and perhaps FFBeast might take a while to get delivered, so if you can't wait, all I say is just get something, because the feeling is just completely different. It is an absolute game changer. So with that said, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this demo. If you have any questions or any comments, please make sure to comment them down below. And I'm sure I'll probably revisit this mod once again at some point because it's just too much fun to fly. But with that said, hopefully I shall catch you in the next video. Adios.